Welcome to the Sports Time Podcast, or the STP Pod for short. No politics, no drama, no arguing. Just two guys talking sports. I'm your host, JJ Peters. Today on the STP Pod, we'll talk about Thursday Night Football highlights. James Harden will need 6 positive tests to start training with the Rockets. LSU football will self-impose or will not be able to participate in a bowl game this year, and much more. Our daily or episode, we every episode we do a poll question, and you can vote on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Sportstown Podcast. And the question was, will James Harden be with the Rockets when the season begins? And currently 75% of you guys said he will be with the Rockets when the season begins. All right, now for a sports update. Paul George is committed to staying with the Clippers. The 6-time All-Star and former MVP candidate gets a massive extension with the LA Clippers. The deal is reportedly worth $226 million for the next 5 years, according to ESPN senior NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski. Woj was the first to report the news about PG-13's extension. This means the Clippers will have a better chance of signing two-time Finals MVP Kawhi Leonard to a big long-term deal. George and Leonard could have been free agents next year if they declined their player option. Leonard is now the next player the Clippers want to lock up. The Claw and PG-13 are great friends and both went to the Clippers last offseason because of each other. The Clippers start the season versus Lakers on the 22nd of December. George has now played with the Pacers, Thunder, and Clippers. They say all good things must come to an end. Beloved and fan favorite J.J. Barea is being waived by the Dallas Mavericks. Barea was the last member of the 2011 championship team that upset LeBron and the Heat. The Mavs have decided to let Barea go home one day, or they've decided to let Barea go basically let go Barea one day before preseason. The plan is to allow him to sign with another team before the preseason begins. He will be greatly missed by the Mavericks and their fans. Let's stay in the basketball realm, shall we? Paul Gasol wants to come back and play with the Lakers and his brother Mark. Gasol has not played since 2019, but he hopes to make a comeback. Gasol won 2 championships with the Lakers in 2009-2010. He eventually left LA in 2014 and joined the Bulls. He eventually played for both the Spurs and Bucks. He signed with the Blazers last offseason, but was waived in November. Gasol was a huge asset to the Lakers when they won the 2 championships in 2009 and 2010. He started his career in Memphis and was eventually traded to LA in 2007. However, it is still very unlikely that Gasol returns to LA because of all the things they would need to do before signing him. NASCAR has announced they have tweaked their 2021 schedule. NASCAR will race their first 3 races in Florida. The race at Auto Club Speedway in Southern California has been canceled. Instead, NASCAR will move the 3rd race this season at the Daytona International Road Course on February 27th. Because of the pandemic, NASCAR will likely not race in California this year. For the first time since 2006, the Cowboys game has been flexed out of the primetime slot in Week 15 versus the injury-prone Niners. Because of how bad the Cowboys are this season, and the NFL has decided to flex the Browns versus Giants game instead. Plus, with how many injuries the 49ers have had this season, the league had no choice but to flex. The NBA is contemplating a COVID-19 vaccine plan. The news was first reported by ESPN's Brian Windhorst. According to multiple sources, the NBA is in the final stages of a vaccine for all players, staff, coaches, and trainers. However, some players might not be on the board, and therefore Commissioner Adam Silver is entertaining the idea of having someone convince them they would be the way to go. They also understand that some teams could get it earlier because of the local and state governments. The NBA also announced they will allow first responders, essential workers, and healthcare workers get first priorities. Earlier on Thursday, the Chicago Bears closed their facility after receiving news that a member of the team had tested positive for COVID-19. The person who had tested positive was not released, and therefore nobody knows if he was a player or staffer. The Bears had said they would do all things virtually. However, the Bears decided to move their practice at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, and after that individual had started isolating in his or her home. The Chicago Bears play the Houston Texans this weekend. Now let's jump. The MLB has released all their league first team. The MLB has announced their first all-league team. The Braves have the most players such as NL MVP Freddie Freeman, Marcell Ozuna, and Max Fried. Manny Machado and Fernando Tatis was also in the NFL for our NL first team. Big names like Mike Trout and Mookie Betts were selected as well. The first team was Freddie Freeman, DJ LeMahieu, Fernando Tatis, Manny Machado. The outfield was Mookie Betts, Mike Trout, and Juan Soto. Salvador Perez of the Kansas City Royals was selected as the first team catcher. The pitchers were Trevor Bauer, Shane Bieber, Yu Darvish, Jacob deGrom, and Max Fried. The relievers were Nick Anderson and Liam Hendriks. AL MVP Jose Abreu for the White Sox was selected as the second team. So the first question that I had was there any player that was snubbed from the first and second team? Now, when I did this on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all those other ones, that was just the audio. I really didn't know if there was really anybody that was not selected. Of course, Jose Abreu being the MVP, but he was selected as the NL or as the he was the AL MVP, but he was a first baseman, and so was Freddie Freeman. And Freddie Freeman, I think, had a little better of a season. So I don't know if he was really snubbed. I know there was a few Braves players that were on the second team that I was a little shocked, but they didn't have as good seasons as they normally have. So I wouldn't say there was any player really snubbed from the first team in the NL and AL. Who had a better season last year, the NL MVP or the AL MVP? I would probably say Freddie Freeman, the NL MVP. He basically he led the Braves to all the way to their first World Series, I think since what, 96, I want to say. Of course, they ended up blowing a 3-1 lead to the Dodgers, who eventually won the World Series. So you could kind of argue the Braves are the second best team last year. But I would say Freddie Freeman had the better year. It was just crazy what happened to him because of if you remember right before the season started, he had tested positive and he was in some really danger. He was close to dying from COVID-19 and came back and just had a wonderful season. So I would probably say Freddie Freeman, even though Jose Abreu had a nice season for the White Sox and the White Sox made the playoffs again, so that was great. Is there any specific player we need to watch out for next year? Well, of course, you need to watch out for Mike Trout and Mookie Betts. Those are the two best players in baseball. Marcell Ozuna, whoever he signs with next year, he was really good last year. I think the Cardinals kind of screwed up of not bringing him back. I'm trying to think if there's some other players we need to really watch out for. Of course, Devin Williams, the reliever for the Brewers, we need to watch out for him. He was pretty good. I'd probably say Fernando Tatis. I mean, imagine what he can do this year. And then, of course, his teammate Manny Machado. We all thought that was a bad signing, but he really proved that he was worth it this year. So we probably need to watch out for them, but I'd probably say either Devin Williams or Fernando Tatis. The LSU football program will forego a bowl game this season if they are invited. They will self-impose a bowl this season because of certain rules they violated through the NCAA. The investigation includes both the football and basketball programs. It's likely through the NCAA's new independent resolution process. LSU has also volunteered to trim their scholarships by 8 for the next 2 years. LSU football Coach O, understands and respects the decision made by the higher powers. Last season, LSU football went 15-0, beat Clemson for the championship, and Joe Burrow won the Heisman. But things took a turn for the worse this year. They lost multiple players in the draft, and multiple players opted out because of the COVID-19 restrictions, which caused them to have a losing record this season. Will this affect the program going forward? I don't think so. It's not really a huge violation by the NCAA, and I think LSU just kind of saw that and just said, you know what, we're not gonna, when we're really good in a few years, we're not gonna have this dooming over us, and we're not gonna have to lose maybe a chance to play in the college football playoff championship if we're basically suspended 1 year. So they basically take it right now when they're not very good. And even if they were permitted to go to, even if they were invited to go to a bowl game, they would have likely not gone. And plus, again, in normal years, they probably would have found a way to go 6-6 and make kind of a crappy bowl game. But I mean, most of those lower end bowls have been canceled. So I mean, I think this is a smart move by LSU just to kind of take the L right now, and just down the road you still have a chance, when they're really good. So I don't think this really affects them going forward. I actually think it actually helps them in the future. Can LSU rebound from this tough season? Absolutely. I mean, they're one of the higher powers still. Coach O is a very good head coach. He's just going through a rough time. And when you have multiple players opting out, you lose so many players. And a lot of people say, well, Alabama and Clemson do this every year where they lose multiple players that go in the draft, a lot of times in the top 10, and they still find a way to get there. But this is a little different. I mean, LSU was pretty mediocre the last few years until last year happened, and they were just really good. So, I mean, a lot of those guys were seniors. So when you do lose a senior, except for Alabama and Clemson, you're not going to be quite the same. Then, of course, you had multiple players testing positive, and of course, they had a rough season. So, I mean, you have to you can't really you can't really blame LSU for this. Yes, it wasn't a great season, but Coach O is doing what he can, and I don't think this will really. I don't think this will. I think they can rebound from this season. Does LSU lose recruits because of this? I don't think so. They've had a few 5-star recruits that still said they are committed to going to LSU. Again, it's not a really big violation. I think it's just a violation that the LSU decided to say, hey, let's just take it now. Let's take the L, and when we're really good, we still have a chance to compete. So I don't think they actually lose star recruits because there's a lot of 5-stars that have stayed the same. I don't think they've lost any really 5-stars yet, according to the ESPN top 150 or top 300 rankings. Let's get switch gears to basketball. James Harden needs 6 straight positive tests in order to start practicing with the Rockets. Crazy. Harden is still not showing up to practice with the team. Instead, he has decided to train in Las Vegas and was attending multiple parties that included a lot of rappers, which were in Atlanta. According to multiple sources, James Harden was not wearing a mask and not following the NBA social distancing protocols. Head coach Steve Silas, the first year, has stated they will deal with Harden when he arrives at the Rockets practice. According to Silas, he and Harden had a small conversation on Wednesday. Not good for Houston. Will James Harden be ready for the season when it starts on December 22nd? I think so. I mean, he is I don't know if he's top 5, but he's definitely a top 10 player. And even though he probably has trained a lot more than we're thinking, he's had a kind of a crazy offseason, but when the season starts, he'll be ready. And I think he's fine with staying the Rockets, but I think he would rather, go to Brooklyn, of course. There has been rumors that he did say he's fine with going to the Sixers, but I think James Harden will be ready for the 22nd. I mean, he is an athlete. He's an NBA player. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's practicing every day. I think he was practicing in Vegas one time and Atlanta the next. So I think James Harden will be ready when the season starts. Will James Harden be a Rocket when the season begins? Now, I gave you guys the vote, and 67, or it's not 67, it was actually 75% of you guys voted he will be, and I'm agreeing with you. If I voted, which I do not vote on the polls, um, uh, I don't vote on the polls. I would have said yes because I mean it's too late to trade him, and plus with all the protocols they're having this year, and you have to wait like 10 days when you get traded to a new team, so that wouldn't have worked out. And he probably wouldn't be able the first week because he'd have to learn the team, have to get around with them, practice more. So I think he's going to stay. I don't think he gets traded until the end of the season or in the middle of the season if things aren't going right. How far can the Rockets go this season? I think they can go pretty far, or not go far. I think they can still make the playoffs, but I don't think they'll go very far. I mean, to be honest with you, it's been a crazy offseason for them. They lost. I mean, they added John Wall, yes, but I mean, in that Western Conference that's loaded, I could see them winning 42 games because, again, they're only playing 72 this year. I could see them being 42-30 and grabbing that 7th seed, but the Western Conference is so competitive. I mean, now you have to worry about Golden State again. You have to worry about Phoenix. New Orleans is going to be certainly better. The Clippers and Lakers are still the same. The Nuggets. The Rockets, I don't think they're going to be able to do a whole lot.